Phoebe Bridgers smashed a Dan Electro 64 baritone on SNL, and people got mad. Hi, I'm Spencer Thomas. Thanks for watching Learning Curve. I hope your 2021 is going well so far. Do me a favor, click subscribe, like, share, bell, etc. Okay, we're done with that. This week I'm going to try something a little different. I just want to put an opinion out there, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. We'll find out. On Saturday, a young artist who I'm not actually that familiar with was on SNL. Now, if you're watching this video and you're a young person, SNL stands for Saturday Night Live. It's a sketch comedy show that's been on since 1975. It has music and comedy and hosts, and it kind of vacillates between cutting-edge comedy and mainstream. And people keep thinking it's done, and then it keeps reinventing itself and spawning new generations of TV and movie stars and amazing comedy and some stuff. But it's still around, so now I'm going to assume you at least know what Saturday Night Live is. Now, periodically, SNL's musical acts will do something that causes a real stir, and it hasn't happened for real in a while. I mean, Ashley Simpson did it with her lip syncing, but then before that, it's kind of a while, you know. In the 70s, maybe early 80s, I guess, Elvis Costello started a song, then stopped it and went and played Radio instead, and they weren't that happy about that. But then later in the 80s, there was an artist named Sinead O'Connor, and she tore up a picture of the Pope, and everybody freaked out. And I will also point out that I believe it was on Saturday Night Live that Nirvana smashed all their instruments, and nobody said anything. Didn't matter. And then, you know, nothing really that crazy has happened for a while. But then, this past Saturday, Phoebe Bridgers smashed a Dan Electro 64, and not the guitar world. I'm in a lot of guitar groups online and a lot of guitar discussion boards. They're not saying anything. But the regular world, the news, Twitter, they're all about all of this, and I kind of wanted to weigh in. So if you haven't seen the clip, Google Phoebe Bridgers, SNL. The song is called I Know the End, and she's great. You know, she's maybe not my favorite artist in the whole world, but she's certainly got a thing. I like what she does. I understand why she has fans, and she's good at what she's doing, as far as I can tell. And she also has cool taste in guitars. Her music is kind of folky, but in the first song, the guitar she doesn't smash, she's playing a B.C.Rich with a capo, which in and of itself is kind of hilarious. She has a multi-instrumentalist that plays violin on the second song, but in the first song, she's playing a Jackson Rhodes, which very shreddy choices for very folky music, and I think it's tongue-in-cheek, but I also think it's awesome, and I'm very happy about it. And by the way, if you look online, there is a whole thread of people who feel like she should have smashed the B.C.Rich instead of the Dan Electro, but that's another story. So at the end of the song, I Know the End, the tempo picks up, there's a guitar solo, everybody kind of starts freaking out. She lets out this primal scream, just this howl, and then she takes that Dan Electro and smashes it into the monitor, sparks fly, and it's rock and roll. And then Twitter blows up. Now, to be fair, Twitter is a cesspool of garbage that periodically has some very insightful, very useful information, and a lot of and let us not forget some hilarious takes and some great one-liners and a lot of crap. So when you're looking at people's Twitter responses, you kind of have to sift through it, because some of their responses, there were people that were upset ironically, and there were people that were all for it. But then there were people who seemed to be genuinely upset about this. One of the things Phoebe said on Twitter is that she had spoken to Dan Electro before the show, and that they were like, yeah, go for it. But please note, Dan Electros are hard to break, and that proved to be true. She got it to kind of crack, but that guitar, I bet you could play that guitar right now if you wanted to. Now, notably, 60s and 70s folk icon David Crosby was outspoken about it. And Crosby recently got in trouble because after Eddie Van Halen passed away, he referred to his body of work as meh. And people were like, dude. So David's been sticking his foot in his mouth a lot lately. Basically, he tweeted that he felt what she did was pathetic, that it had been done a lot before, so it wasn't original, and that guitars are works of art. Each instrument in and of itself is a piece of art, and that you should respect that piece of art. Those are all fair points, but I would also like to say, rock and roll, man. It's rock and roll. So let's look back at rock and roll. Let's look back at smashing guitars, right? There wasn't a Twitter when Pete Townsend started smashing guitars in 1964, right? If there was, maybe we would know that most people looked at that and went, Pete, that is a very expensive guitar you're smashing, and not that people went, well, that's awesome. But everybody thought the bulk of the audience went, hooray, smashing. Now, again, there wasn't a Twitter, but there were journalists, there were writers, there are people alive now that were there when it happened. Now, the info I found said that the first time Townsend smashed his guitar was at a club called the Railway Club in London in 1964. But this isn't the first time that move had been done on stage, right? So in the 50s, a guy named Ira Leuven, bluegrass artist, him and his brother released an album with the super metal name Satan is Real. That's tight. So Ira, if he was drunk on stage, which he frequently was, and he couldn't get his mandolin in tune, which, who knows, maybe he was too drunk to know if it was in tune. But anyway, if he couldn't get his mandolin in tune, Ira Leuven would just smash it right on the stage. In 1959, Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry were on tour together, which, oh my God, can you imagine? So they're on tour, and the guy that books the tour wants them to switch headlining spots, or who the closer is, basically. And Jerry Lee Lewis is not known to be a humble person, or a particularly nice person, or a particularly, generous, let's work together person. So when he had to open for Chuck Berry, which did not sit well with him, he took a Coke can, put gasoline on it, put it on the piano, and then when he got to his closer, which was perfectly titled Great Balls of Fire, he sprinkled the gas on the piano, lit it on fire, played the song, peace out. Now, it's not the exact same as smashing a guitar, but it certainly has the same feel to it. It's got the same intention behind it, and it's got the same intensity. So, Pete Townsend didn't invent breaking your stuff, but he's kind of credited as the modern rock and roll guy. He's the guy that everybody looked to and went, we should break our stuff. What you can take away from those two stories, by the way, is if you destroy your instruments, people will talk about it for a long time. Pete Townsend claims that he got the idea to destroy his instruments from an artist named Gustav Metzger. Metzger was the founder of the Destruction in Art Symposium. He was this avant-garde artist in the early 60s who would do things like use acid on canvas, and the acid would destroy the canvas. And I mean the acid ow, my skin, not the hey, do you think our pants think of us as transportation kind of acid? And so his art was designed to decompose. And Pete Townsend says that's where he got the idea to destroy their stage setup, which is a great story, and it makes Pete Townsend sound really smart. But Roger Daltrey says that's not what happened at all. I'm going to read you an excerpt from an interview Roger Daltrey did with Vulture to promote his book, Thanks a Lot, Mr. Kibblewhite. Daltrey claims that Townsend lied about the artistic underpinnings of his guitar-smashing habit, which was born instead out of a desire to impress a group of women after a slip-up during a gig in September of 1964. The first time a guitar died, it was an accident, Daltrey writes. The only difference was a new collapsible stage, which was a few inches higher than the upturned beer crates that we'd usually been performing on. Now, Pete was in the middle of his repertoire of moves when he struck the guitar through the ceiling. The place went quiet. Some girls snickered. Townsend covered up his mistake by smashing the guitar to pieces, and the rest is history. This pissed me off. Pete will tell you that it was art, Daltrey continues, that he was taking the work of Gustav Metzger to the next level. Gustav who? Bullocks. He's journalizing. The hole in the ceiling had nothing to do with Metzger and everything to do with snickering girls. It was heartbreaking when I remember how much I'd struggled to get my first guitars. It was like watching an animal being slaughtered, an expensive animal at that we had to replace with another expensive animal before the next gig. We had to pay for that hole in the ceiling. From then on, the audience expected us to break our instruments. Look, a lot of my favorite bands smashed their instruments. Jimi Hendrix did it. Obviously, The Who did it. Kiss did it. Nirvana did it. And when it happens and I see it happening, I think, wow, that's intense. I'm always into it. It works for me every time. And I think it's been happening since the term garage band was coined. You know, I think there's a certain kind of young, angry band that if you give them an audience, they are going to start breaking stuff, and people are going to love it. Personally, I've never smashed a guitar. I love the idea of smashing a guitar, but I don't think it would hold up in reality. You know, I like guitars too much. I think if you gave me a guitar to smash and let me play it first, I'd turn into like one of those people that adopts too many cats. You know, I'd be like, well, I mean, feel the neck on that one. I don't think we should be smashing this. Oof, you're not going to find another one like that. Do you have a guitar I like less? Okay, now this one, if you listen when you let the pickups ring out, we have to save this guitar. And that would just keep going. So I'd never get around to actually smashing it. I also think there's something that people are kind of missing in this argument, and I think it's something that Dan Electro can use moving forward as kind of a marketing ploy, you know, because I don't know if you saw the dents that she put in that monitor, but they were pretty deep, right? She took a good whack at it, and that guitar held up pretty well. You know, so maybe this swinging and smashing is not so much a bug as it is a feature, right? What about the guitar as a weapon? By the way, Google Keith Richards guitar as weapon. Now, I think this is a feature that they didn't put in the original brochure when they introduced the Telecaster, which was the first solid body mass-produced guitar. But essentially, it was a big slab of wood on the end of a baseball bat, and people took notice of that fact. See, this thing, it's not only good for picking, it's good for clobbering, right? There's a quote from a book, The Birth of Loud. Buck Owens hadn't been the first to discover that the Telecaster's solid body and long sturdy neck could be handy in a fight. Aside from being a talented musician, a talented songwriter, a talented performer, Phoebe Bridgers is also an attractive young lady. And as we keep learning, the world is not a perfect place. There are a million, billion beautiful souls out there in the world, and a couple of real asshats. So I think Dan Electro should focus not only on their amazing tone, but also on their ability to put a dent in the skull of somebody who doesn't know how to behave in public so good. The Dan Electro 64 baritone. I'm sorry, what did you just call me? The Dan Electro 64 baritone, because if I shoot you, it's manslaughter, but if I smash in your stupid mug, it's self-defense. The Dan Electro 64 baritone, not as clumsy or random as a blaster, an elegant weapon from a more civilized age. The Dan Electro 64 baritone, now you're messing with a son of a bitch. Look, however you feel about Phoebe Bridgers and Phoebe Bridgers smashing a guitar, I gotta say, that primal scream she belts out and the way she took a whack at that monitor and the sparks flying, that felt like we needed it after the year we've just been through. It was cathartic. I liked it. It felt like a release for me. It looked fun. So good on you, Phoebe Bridgers. I'm glad you did it. All right, that's Learning Curve for this week. If you like the show, please subscribe, please like, please share. My name is Spencer Thomas. Try to be nice to each other. I'll see you next week.